Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. We're going to be looking at this guide for educators from Lynn Daniel Consulting LLC. And it's about navigating something that they call supremacist attitudes in the workplace.
Yeah.
I know that sounds a little intense, but before you think we're about to go on some crazy political rant or something, just hold on. This guide actually takes a really refreshing approach.
Yeah.
And it brings in the work of bell hooks and all her ideas about love as a tool for change. So we're talking about practical strategies for reclaiming your power and promoting genuine acceptance in the workplace.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the guide kind of looks at some of the more subtle ways that, like, bias and systemic issues can kind of creep into professional settings. It's not always about outright discrimination, but it's more like these deep-seated patterns that can just subtly undermine people's authority and contributions.
Yeah, it's like all those microaggressions everyone's talking about these days, right? Not always blatant, but they can sting.
Exactly. And the guide uses this term, excellence as a target. And this is where professionals from minority groups are finding that their skills and their achievements, instead of being celebrated, are actually becoming reasons for marginalization.
So like imagine you're going above and beyond. You're exceeding expectations.
Oh.
But instead of getting recognition, you're met with like more scrutiny or micromanagement, or your ideas are dismissed. The guide suggests that that could be a sign of these supremacist dynamics at play. It's like your competence is being used against you.
Yeah, that's a really insightful way to put it. And it's so important to remember that it's not just about individual bias, but these like larger systems of power that are often at work.
Yeah.
And, supremacist attitudes can manifest in these very subtle ways. So it's even more crucial to recognize those patterns.
And speaking of patterns, the guide offers some concrete advice for educators facing these types of situations. One thing that it emphasizes is the importance of documentation. So if you're noticing a pattern of being micromanaged or having your expertise dismissed, the guide recommends keeping a record of specific instances, including dates and times and details of what happened.
Documentation can be so important. It provides that concrete evidence if you ever need to formally address the issue. But even beyond that, the act of documenting can actually help you gain a clearer understanding of the patterns themselves. You might start to see connections and trends that you hadn't noticed before.
Yeah, it's like connecting the dots. You see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
And it can be really empowering. And then with that awareness, the guide encourages you to take the next step, which is setting firm, visible boundaries and asserting your authority. And I love that. It's just so direct. It's like saying, this is my domain and my expertise matters.
Absolutely. Setting boundaries is not about being aggressive. It's about clear communication and advocating for yourself. It's about creating those clear expectations for how you expect to be treated and how you expect to be able to contribute your expertise. And you know what? Setting those boundaries can actually help everyone understand expectations, and it can foster a more cooperative environment in the long run.
And speaking of cooperation, that's where the guide takes a really unexpected turn. It brings in the work of bell hooks and her book, All About Love, New Visions. Now, you might be thinking, way love, in a guide about supremacist attitudes. I'll be honest, I kind of had the same reaction at first.
Yeah.
But trust me, it makes sense when you really delve into it.
What bell hooks argues is that supremacist mindsets are often rooted in a misunderstanding of what love truly is. She says that genuine love is about understanding, respect, connection, compassion. And it's not about power and control and domination. And so by choosing love over competition and fear, we can begin to dismantle those supremacist dynamics that can just pervade our workplaces and our lives.
One of my favorite quotes from bell hooks that the guide includes is, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." Just think about that for a second. Imagine applying that to a difficult workplace situation. Instead of viewing someone who's exhibiting those supremacist attitudes as an adversary, you approach them with the spirit of understanding and a desire for connection.
That can be such a powerful shift in perspective. And it doesn't mean condoning the behavior, but it does open up a possibility for dialogue and transformation, and even reconciliation. It's about recognizing our shared humanity,
Right.
and seeing the potential for growth in everyone.
And that's where things get really interesting, because the guide goes on to suggest specific ways that we can put these ideas into practice using strategic language and communication techniques to address bias, reclaim our power, and promote cooperation in our workplaces.
Yeah.
Got a lot to unpack here, and I'm really excited to dive in.
Me too.
So let's get started.
One technique I found really interesting was the idea of using questions to shift the focus from blame to observation. So like instead of accusing someone of being dismissive, the guide suggests asking something like, I noticed that my ideas haven't been included in recent discussions. Could you help me understand why that is?
Oh, that's clever. It's
What,
not
what
confrontational, but it does make them think about it, you know?
Exactly. You're not attacking them, but you're just asking for understanding, and it subtly highlights the pattern without, making it
Well,
personal.
right.
Yeah.
The guide also talks about reclaiming your power
Yeah.
and using assertive language to articulate your expertise and contributions. Like, for example, instead of saying, I think I might have a good idea, you could say, based on my experience in this area, I believe the most effective approach would be.
Oh, that's a great example. It's about owning your expertise and presenting your ideas confidently. And by connecting your recommendations to your experience and your knowledge, you're just reinforcing your authority in a way that's both assertive and professional.
I like that. It's good. And it's not just about what you say, but it's also about how you say it right. The guide talks about the importance of nonverbal communication, like maintaining eye contact and using a strong voice and projecting confidence.
That's so true. Our nonverbal cues can really speak volumes, and they can either reinforce or undermine our message. You could be saying all the right words, but if your body language is kind of showing insecurity or hesitation, it can really lessen the impact.
It's like actions speak louder than words, but
Exactly.
like your body language speaks as loud as words. You
Exactly.
gotta have them both aligned.
Yes.
So we've talked a lot about strategic communication and setting boundaries,
Mm.
but the guide also acknowledges that this stuff can be really emotionally draining.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So self-care is super important.
Absolutely. It's so important to prioritize your well-being, especially when you're facing, these kinds of systemic barriers. The guide offers a bunch of different self-care tips, simple things like taking breaks and getting enough sleep,
Yeah.
but then also more proactive strategies like therapy or joining a support group.
Yeah, it's like you've got to fill your own cup first
Exactly.
before you can pour from it.
You can't effectively advocate for yourself or others if you're running on empty.
Yeah, that's so true.
And this goes back to bell hooks' ideas about love and self-respect, recognizing your worth and setting those boundaries to protect your emotional and mental health.
But sometimes even with all the self-care in the world, a work environment can just be toxic.
Yeah.
And in those cases, the guide suggests a really difficult option, but it can be empowering. And that's leaving on your own terms.
This is where the idea of retirement takes on a whole new meaning. It's not about giving up. It's about choosing to prioritize your well-being and not letting yourself be defined by a system that doesn't value you.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to let this toxic environment dim my light. I'm taking my light and going somewhere else.
That's such a powerful image, and it just speaks to the importance of agency and self-determination. You have the right to choose a work environment that supports your well-being and allows you to flourish.
This whole approach is just so refreshing. It's not about focusing on the negative. It's about empowering people to create positive change
Right.
within themselves and also in their professional spaces.
I think that's what makes this guide so valuable. It combines practical strategies with this deeper philosophical framework, so it gives you the tools to navigate the tough stuff. But it also encourages you to look at your own beliefs and values.
It's a call to action.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
like, here's how to make a difference, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you.
Right.
I think that spirit of collective empowerment is really at the heart of Bell Hook's work.
Absolutely. She believed in the power of love and justice to create a more equitable and compassionate world.
So as we wrap up our look at this guy, I want to bring it back to you, our listeners.
Mhm.
What does all this mean for you? If you're facing similar challenges in your own professional life,
Yeah.
I mean, how can you apply these principles of love and cooperation in your own professional life?
It's a great question. And, it might look different for everyone. Maybe it's consciously changing how you talk, like we were saying earlier, moving away from blame and trying to understand. Or maybe it's like having the courage to set those boundaries, even when it feels a little scary.
Yeah, and I was thinking too about how we can support each other.
Yeah.
What if instead of getting so caught up in competition at work, we focus more on collaborating and helping each other out?
What's really interesting is that this guide reminds us that choosing love doesn't mean being passive or just letting things slide. It's about holding each other accountable, but still believing that we can grow and change.
Right. It's not about ignoring the problem. It's about addressing it in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
You can be firm and assertive, but still have compassion and want a good outcome for everyone.
Exactly. And remember, even small things can make a difference, like a kind word or a gesture of support or just listening to someone. Those things can really help create a better atmosphere for everyone.
It's not about some huge overnight change. It's about making better choices every day.
Yes.
And those choices can change the culture of our workplaces.
I like you put that. That brings us back to one of Bell Hooks' most powerful messages. She said, "The practice of love offers no place of safety. We risk loss, hurt, pain. We risk being acted upon by forces outside our control."
Wow, that's a really powerful quote.
It is.
It reminds me that choosing love can be hard,
It can.
and it takes courage,
It does.
but the rewards can be huge.
Absolutely. Like Bell Hooks goes on to say, to truly love, we must learn to mix various ingredients: care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, and trust, as well as honest and open communication.
It's like a recipe for a better world, not just at work, but everywhere.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
I think that's a pretty inspiring thought for our listeners.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
So this has been an amazing deep dive. Thank you to Lynn Daniel Consulting for this awesome guide. And of course, thank you to Bell Hooks for her amazing wisdom.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you, dear listener, for being here with us. Remember, you have the power to make a difference. Don't underestimate the impact of your choices and your actions. And most importantly, your love.
Until next time, keep diving deep.